let's talk about Wang Yi's arrest here
Yeah.
for a moment. You mentioned that earlier, because the book kind of leads to that as the crescendo. Right at the very end, you're left with the writing, and then he's arrested, and then either some other leaders have their writings, and they're after their arrest. Take us through that for a moment.
To talk about his arrest, it's probably best to talk about the summer before he was arrested, to begin. So, as I said, in early 2018, in the winter of 2018, these new religious regulations began to be put into place. Early in 2018, one of the large churches in Beijing was shut down. It made a lot of headlines around the world. It was a massive event shutting down this church. In the summer of 2018, so Early Rain every year commemorated the anniversary of the Sichuan earthquake. And they did this every year. And basically, that summer, Wang Yi was arrested leading up to the church's memorial service, basically, that they would hold. And that arrest only lasted for 48 hours. But it was a pretty good warning sign that more was coming. And I would say the whole rest of that year, anyone who knew Wang Yi or followed Wang Yi was pretty much anticipating that a larger arrest or kind of more significant arrest was going to happen and was going to come. And he certainly knew that. He very much anticipated that he was going to be arrested and probably spending some significant time in jail. In the fall of 2018, he wrote My Declaration of Faithful Disobedience and gave it to the leadership of his church and basically said to them, if I'm held for longer than 48 hours, this is my statement, release it. In China, you can be held up to 48 hours on kind of an administrative arrest. And then if you're held beyond 48 hours, you're going to be going through the whole process. So on December 9th, he was arrested and his wife was arrested along with him. It's pretty common practice that wives also receive harassment or some form of arrest at some point. It really mostly so that they can't speak out publicly while their husband is in trial or undergoing trial. So his wife was also arrested. And then basically over the course of the following weekend, I think it was a Friday night, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and look, but it was over the course of a weekend that all of the pastors and the elders for Early Rain were also arrested. And then it became clear that it was going to be a much, much bigger event even than that, because there were just hundreds of officers, police officers, and authorities involved. And they went in. Early Rain, as I said, was pretty large, and they actually had a couple of floors in an office building that they used as their space. And so they had a very large library. They had all these meeting spaces, and all of their space was shut down. All of their property was confiscated. Their bank accounts were frozen and confiscated. And then over the course of the following weeks, eventually they basically continued to arrest people, and eventually roughly half of their members had been arrested in some shape or form. A lot of them were arrested for short periods of time and released. Some were held much longer. a lot of them were sent back to their hometowns. So in China, you don't really have freedom of movement, you could say. Basically, you have they have a registration system, so that it's kind of like a housing permits system where so like, I could move to New York City freely, and if I had the financial means to stay there, then I could just stay there indefinitely. In China, if you're from Chengdu and you wanted to move to Beijing, you would have to officially transfer your like registration to Beijing. And you can only do that if you have a reason to do so, like a job or, I don't know, whatever would give you an official reason for going there. But how this plays out is that if you move to another city without that registration being transferred, you don't have access to social services. So your kids can't go to the schools. You don't have access often to things like medical care. There are a lot of things that are restricted if you are living outside of whatever your official registered city is. One of the things that happened with a lot of early Rain's members was that anyone who was living in Chengdu, or a lot of people who were not from Chengdu originally, were sent back to their hometowns and essentially kind of forcibly removed as a way to try to disband the church, essentially. And there were a lot of really hard things that continued to happen throughout that year. A lot of people were under essentially house arrest, or a lot of people lost out on their property, or like landlords would kick them out. A lot of people had to keep moving several times due to pressure from the authorities. So it really was an ongoing difficulty and time of suffering and persecution for the members of the church. Wang Yi's statement was released as he had wished 48 hours afterwards. And I, had the privilege of helping with the translation to get it into English. And we shared it, and it was read by a lot of people around the world. We have a very little blog, and that had a lot of people reading it. And then it went on to be translated into many other languages as well. For a lot of people, that's when they first heard about Wang Yi. A lot of people that I talked to, that winter of 2018 is kind of where they first heard about something that was going on in China, or the situation of the house churches in China. And a lot of people have read his Declaration of Faithful Disobedience. So he was sentenced to 9 years in jail in December of 2019. And that is the longest jail sentence given to a house church pastor, really since the early days of the existence of the house church, really since the Cultural Revolution. So it's a big deal, very significant. And his wife was in jail for a year. She was released after his sentencing. And then she has essentially been under house arrest with their teenage son since then. And so she still has it's not even limited. She really has no contact even today with their church.
Oh,
yeah,
church,
or much of the outside world. Yeah. So we don't know a whole lot about her situation. We know she's out. We know she's, well, but
and what do we know about
very limited contact? So
what do we know about Wang Yi?
Not much. So, yeah, this is the 4th anniversary of his arrest. So he is almost halfway through his sentence. There's not a lot of information out there about how he's doing. The picture you mentioned, the picture on the book, that is the only picture that is out there of him that actually is him in his jail cell. And so, we know he seems to be in good health and doing okay. But there's not really a whole lot of more information beyond that. I believe his wife has visited him once, which was a big cause for celebration.